All right, we are live with Steven Lazer. Steven, welcome. Global CTO of Healthcare for Dell. We are so excited to have you and welcome everybody watching. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for having me today, Sabrina. I truly do appreciate it and really look forward to the opportunity to partner together and have a good conversation today.
Yeah, and boy, do we have a lot to talk about. I mean, just given your role, I want to give a little bit of background about you for those, a few folks who don't know you. So you're the global CTO for Dell around healthcare. You have over 30 years of experience in IT, 20 of which in healthcare, and couldn't be more relevant than what we're going through right now. And we're going to dive into that. You've also had a chance to see, innovation. You've been part of product development and innovation teams as well. So really want to unpack that. But I guess for folks who don't know you, tell us a little bit about yourself and what we should know.
Well, a little bit about me. So, as you mentioned, I've been in technology since the very early days of technology, actually pre-actual internet days, and starting to do a bunch of development around internet days and things like that. I've had the luxury of partnering with some very interesting organizations, working with some of those organizations, developing new technologies, developing how we actually go about serving the internet, among other things, and creating some of those things that we now look at as commonplace, and in some cases, very old technology to go along with me. But along with that, I've spent my last 20 plus years in healthcare. I really started in healthcare in order to try and give something back to the world. I did very well, obviously, through the dot-com era because of where I was sitting in the dot-com area, and it worked out very well for me. But how do I give something back to society? How do we do things a little bit better? How do we go ahead and improve society? And with that, I joined a healthcare organization. And really started to spend some time there learning about healthcare. At the same time, we're doing that, learning about ways that we can start to utilize technology to change business and change the business of healthcare itself. And in this country, healthcare is that it is a business. We have to be able to be efficient with it. We have to be able to not only create those technologies, but utilize technology in a way that is driving efficiency, driving solutions, driving ways that we can do things better, faster, better outcomes, spending less money, spending less time, and how do we change those lives as not only the patients but also the clinicians.
Right. And that's one of the things that's so fascinating about your background is everything you've been able to see and sort of the evolution of the IT industry as a whole, but also as healthcare as we are kind of making our way through and I know we'll talk about that, the pandemic of COVID. So one of the things I want to dive in, and I'm sure this conversation will kind of evolve in and of itself, is you've had a chance to see both at Dell and kind of across your background things that work. You get to be a part of product development and innovation in ways that most of us wouldn't be able to see. And so you've seen teams and organizations that are incredibly innovative and can build products that actually drive those outcomes that you're talking about. And then you've seen the other side of it where they haven't been successful. So unpack that for us. What are those traits or characteristics, or are there any that lead to those successful products and innovation, both in an organization sort of holistically and teams at more of a smaller, more micro level?
Okay. Be happy to unpack that for you. As you start to think about technology and technology innovation, technology innovation in and of itself is not going to drive innovation within healthcare or within that environment. What we need to do is really take a look at it and look at it from the perspective of what are we trying to achieve and why are we trying to achieve it, number one. Is there a value? Is there a use case? And this is something I think about every single day as we look at technology and look at other solutions and other possibilities within Dell Technologies as to what is the outcome? What are we trying to achieve? What is the end game of this? And does it make sense? Let's start there. Mm-hmm. Because does it make sense? Does it change the way we deliver care? Does it improve clinicians' lives? Does it improve outcomes for our patients? Does it dramatically reduce cost and reduce activities so that we can focus more on what our core core functions are from a healthcare and healthcare delivery perspective. And as we think about that, how do we go ahead and bring all those things together into our decisions about what should go forward versus just bringing anything forward? There are a lot of really cool ideas out there. Many of them serve only one function or a very limited function. Some of them are 2/3 of the way baked into an overall solution. And so many of them, unfortunately, are not terribly well thought through and really don't see beyond that one initial idea.
Yeah. You know, in psychology, I have a background in behavioral analysis, and it's one of my still fun things to kind of geek out on sometimes. And in psychology, we call it a backwards chain where you kind of start with the end results. And I know that this, we'll play a little buzzword bingo here to have some fun. I know that we talk a lot about business outcomes, but you see it especially in healthcare. And I think that's what you're saying is one of those common traits of successful products and teams that can innovate is that you're really looking at the outcome. You're really starting with the end result and kind of working your way backwards. Am I understanding that right?
You are correct. Is what are we trying to drive towards? What are we trying to be successful with? How do we think that we're going to take whatever this is and be able to drive one of those particular outcomes that we're talking about? Again, better outcomes for our patients, better outcomes for the clinicians, reduced time, reduced effort, et cetera, and helping those organizations really overcome where they are. We can't solve a problem unless we know what the problem is, in my opinion. And it's very, very basic, but I think we have a tendency to lose sight of that as we get into the really, I'll call them bright, shiny objects of development and innovation. They're really cool. They're really neat things that we can do. Should we? That's the real question is, should we? And, oh, by the way, where do ethics and responsibility fall into this? How do we make sure that we're very effective in how we look at these things? How do we eliminate bias? How do we look at diversity within this and look at the social responsibility of whether you're a small organization or a large organization, if we're going to develop things that are based on whether we're talking about it from an artificial intelligence perspective, as we hear constantly in the press and in the news today, or whether we're talking about it simply from a developmental and deployment perspective. How do we take and democratize all of this? How do we make sure that we don't build in bias? How do we make sure that we are thinking ethically in this overall approach and really take and support our customer base that way, or customers, patients, et cetera? Whatever you want to call that constituent base. I'm not really sure how to frame that up. I usually use the word constituent, but sometimes it does include customers.
Yeah. Well, and you're the global CTO of a Fortune 30 company. So, and we have a lot of executives that watch these lives and engage. What advice do you have to them to lead these efforts? Because you bring in a lot of factors. I don't know if necessarily things like diversity and inclusion or culture or ethics or, breaking the bias and making sure you don't have bias kind of built into your systems and process. I'm assuming that didn't necessarily come into play or wasn't at the forefront like it is now. That being said, with how complicated and complex the, sort of playing field already is, what guidance or advice do you have to other executives that they try to lead these types of teams?
First, I apologize, Sabrina, but I am going to give you a little bit of a correction here in that I am only the CTO for healthcare and life sciences within Dell Technologies.
Right.
I want to make sure that our global CTO, John Rose, is our global CTO from a technology perspective, leading the organization on the developmental side. But with that, I have the pleasure of working with John and working with his teams and looking at how we develop technologies and making sure that we bring all that together in an appropriate fashion. Now, you talk about how do we develop innovation? How do we think about innovation? How do we look towards that future? And it really is around problem solving. And starting, again, as far out in the future as you can. I joke around about dusting off the crystal ball every year and trying to figure out what the next future is for the next 10 to 12 months. But it comes from a tremendous amount of research, talking to the people that you're trying to work with, understanding what their challenges are. There's a comment made to me by CTO of a very, very large healthcare system in central US. And his comment is, Bring me technology that truly improves our clinicians' lives and does not require more time, more effort, more work on their parts in order to be able to actually have an improvement there. Every technology that has come forward adds workload to them. How do we go the other direction? How do we find things and tools and technology and automation-based capabilities? How do we look for new functions that have not been thought about, or new utilizations of existing functions in order to drive some of those changes? We talk about thinking out of the box. Well, with myself and my team, we don't have a box. There is no box. There are no borders, there are no boundaries. Go as creative as you can, then we'll take and refine that and bring that back in. And yes, there eventually becomes a framework around that and really start to build some of that out. But it's really around how do we go ahead and bring all of that together in order to focus on what would be appropriate innovation. We talk about it from an ethics and a responsibility perspective, and that's really more of a social agenda. I have a tremendous amount of respect for, obviously, our leader, Michael Dell, and his social agenda within the organization, and being able to support that. And I take that as a responsibility of my own, along with the organization. But that is one of my responsibilities, is help drive that social agenda, help us figure out what is the best way to do this. How do we find better ways to go ahead and bring things together? We build technology. I don't ever talk about technology when I talk to our customer base.
Bingo.
Ever. It's about fixing problems, and that's it.
I was going to say, unpack that, because I think that is probably one of the biggest takeaways people can get from your message and what you do and what you deliver. It's so important. So unpack that for us.
In unpacking that, I mean, this comes back to a little bit of what we've already touched on, but in unpacking that a little bit, I don't care if I have to use 2 gerbils and a locomotive in order to make this work. It doesn't matter. And oh, by the way, we need 3 bananas as well. And I'm joking around a little bit, but that's how creative the discussions can get as we start to bring this in. From a Dell Technologies perspective, obviously, we'd like to support and utilize Dell Technologies equipment and kit that goes with that. At the same time, we know that we don't have everything that will fix every solution and create every solution for every problem. There are limitations that we have from an organizational perspective that allow us to do certain things and not do other things. But at the same time, how do we bring together all those right pieces to solve the issue? And that's really what it's about.
Yeah. It sounds, again, I think you said this earlier, it sounds simple, but I think a lot of times we kind of get lost in the excitement of this new shiny object, or, what technology can do, not necessarily thinking about what should it be doing. What can we be doing to simplify, to improve?
And that is, and I'm sitting here, I'm looking at my desk here off in the background, where I'm looking at my easy button and there literally is one on my desk. It goes up on camera every now and then in order to remind us, keep it simple, keep it achievable. As you think about innovation, start small and build on it, iterate on it, develop on it. We talk about agile technologies and agile development pipelines, but we so rarely see that actually deployed. We so rarely see that really brought to the forefront. In order to be able to go ahead and do this, we really need to think about it from that perspective in order to be able to start with what's good enough. If it works, iterate on it, develop it, grow it, continue to build on it, and really take out those barriers to failure. If you're going to fail quickly. It's okay.
And you bring up something that's so important, because I think as an organization that enables organizations like Dell and your channel and your ecosystem, so much of what I hear from leadership is this hesitancy towards, quote, digital transformation, because it's such a massive picture in their mind. But what you're saying is start small. Yes. Start with what's working and iterate. And the other thing you said is work with research. I think a lot of times we have an idea, or our teams might have egos where they just assume they know all the answers or all the variables or all the research they might need. To your point, you've got to have that information.
And part of this is bringing that level of humility to this discussion and really being able to be humble in how you approach these things. Realize that none of us know everything.
Yeah.
We'll always learn something throughout there, out in the world. There are always things that we can do better, we can do faster, we can learn from, we can grow from. Um, Frankly, that's one of the things I love about what I do is I have the opportunity to learn and grow and learn new things every single day. And if we approach it right, we take in what we learn, we apply it, and turn out something that's completely different.
Right. Right. And that's part of the way we met was talking around DEI and what does that really mean for such a massive organization like Dell? What does that mean for you in leading your teams? And how does that come into play with healthcare? I don't know if we've ever had a time where healthcare has had to innovate at such a global scale and so quickly. We've certainly had pockets and periods of times of innovation within the industry. But the pandemic certainly accelerated that, and perhaps that's the largest understatement of the world. But that's those kinds of other factors, like we've talked about, come into play, and I think again that can feel so daunting to organizations, and so it's almost paralyzing to them where they do nothing. And so what I like about what you're saying is there is a path towards success. There is a path towards innovation and accelerating and simplifying things that you're doing, but it's starting with these bite sizes. It's starting with kind of checking your ego at the door, stopping with, the over complexities and think about, okay, let's really get creative. Let's not set any boxes. Let's really build outside the box. Do I have that right?
You do have that right. And don't be afraid to build outside the box. Don't be afraid to step outside of what the quote unquote norms are for this. Look at things differently, step back, and very definitely check your ego at the door and don't ever think about bringing it back into the discussion because it doesn't belong there.
Yeah.
The discussion is about focusing on those solutions that you're working to build. It's about driving things forward. It's about being able to take pieces from that are 5 miles down the road, pieces that are right in front of you, and find those pieces and bring them together. I mean, that's what innovation is all about. And that's how we look at innovation. It's looking at the technologies, the capabilities, the human capital that you have, applying all of that and making it an environment that's safe for them to fail in. So they feel comfortable going out on those very thin limbs, if that's the case, and that's okay.
Yeah.
There's nothing that's out of bounds unless it's illegal, immoral, or unethical. Honestly, there's
wow.
The rest of it is all fair game for consideration and discussion if we believe that we can drive innovation out of it. It doesn't mean that we are going to do anything unethical. It doesn't mean we're going to do anything immoral. It doesn't mean we're going to do anything that is illegal, of course. But those are the only boundaries that I established for the team. Is that if again, I was joking around about the two gerbils in a locomotive, but it's kind of real in that way, in that we bring together things that we don't necessarily possess as Dell, along with the capabilities of what we bring to the table as Dell. We understand where the market is going. We understand where our partners are going from a developmental perspective, looking at 2 and 3 and 5 year roadmaps and working with them as to where technology is headed. And being able to understand some of that. Some of it may never ever see the light of day, which is just fine. And parts of it will, which is also wonderful. But how do we look at that and how do we, again, without fear, how do you bring those things together and bring them forward? And even if we do develop something and it never sees the light of day, or we hand it off to someone, or we put it into open source, or we do something else with it, that's okay.
Right. So you brought up something really interesting, and this is just out of curiosity, I'm dying to know. So what percentage of things that you and your team build would you say actually, make it to market?
Within my team, I would say about 60-ish% actually make it out of the gate. Now, in most cases, they're established functions, they're established capabilities, and we're simply bringing them together in a different way, which is why they make it to market.
Okay.
If we're talking about new creative development, probably 3 to 5% realistically.
Wow. And I think that's also one of the key takeaways, because I think, we hear something like, oh, fail fast. What does that mean? when you hear something like 60% and maybe 5%, those aren't numbers that maybe everybody would expect, especially from a company as massive as Dell. But the point is, that's the only way you can innovate, is if you continue to try new things. If you continue, and to your point, to fail fast means not everything's going to make it out of the gate, but that can't be the barrier to trying.
Correct. And that's really the key, is that, there is no fear in failing. There is no fear in trying something new. There is no fear in looking at things a little bit differently. Yes, at the end of the day, we need to be able to be more than just consultative. We need to be able to be innovative and consultative together. But with that, how do we take and drive that into something that makes sense?
Right.
We talk about not everything getting out the door, and that's very, very common. We try to focus on the pieces that we think will get out the door. I sit and look at probably, I don't know, probably anywhere from 10 to 50 companies a month as startups.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
We get involved in a number of incubators. We get involved with a number of other sources to look at those capabilities and see what's going on out there. This is the only way to learn, is to figure out what's out there. What are we going to do? How are we going to do this? How are we going to make things different and really be able to bring things to bear?
Right. And again, I mean, this just unpacks and opens up so many more questions. And of course, we're out of time. But I mean, it's just fascinating to me, and it's encouraging, frankly, because again, we work with a lot of organizations that are trying to work their way through quote unquote digital transformation.
Mm-hmm.
And you give such actionable steps to say, okay, here's how you can do it from a leadership perspective, from a team member's perspective, just from an individual contributor. Here's how you can innovate. Here's how you can continue to kind of build off of that. So I really appreciate this.
Well, it's absolutely been my pleasure, Sabrina. I truly appreciate the opportunity and look forward to possibly an opportunity to come back and chat again sometime soon.
I would love that. So before we go, any last resources or tips that you would recommend if folks are interested in learning more or kind of taking their teams and innovation to a next level?
From an innovation perspective, the comments that I've shared so far around fast failure, determine for your organization what that means so that you're not overly invested.
Mm-hmm.
When we talk about creating that fear-free environment, it's really around how do you manage and lead your teams and encourage them to do things and think differently, not be afraid of innovation. The worst thing that we have is a failure, in which case we've lost some time, maybe a little bit of money in the process. Hopefully not too much, but at the same time, we've learned something. Mm-hmm. And something that may not have worked for whatever particular solution we're talking about might be applied to the next one that's coming up.
That's exactly it. Mm-hmm.
And these are all bits and pieces that we learn and we put on the shelf and look through that library at times and come back to it. And don't be opposed to coming back to it. I actually just had a discussion earlier today with someone about something we looked at 3 years ago, and we're going to bring it back out and dust it off and take another look at it.
Yeah. Wow. See, and that's so true. A failure now might be a success later. Mm-hmm. That's a big takeaway. That's a big takeaway, especially when you start to really apply it to life. So thank you again. I can't wait to hear the response and the feedback on this. And we would love to have you back again. Thank you for joining. We appreciate it.
You're very welcome, Sabrina. And if you'd like to come back, I'd even offer to do a Q&A session.
Oh, that's a great idea. I would love to do that.
Okay.
We'll do that next. All right. Stay tuned for the Q&A. Well, thank you, and we'll see you soon.
Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.